So, welcome to this talk about an open platform supporting home hospitalization. And this platform was piloted in the Interact NWE-Chance project with about almost 70 patients, I think. My name is Knoppel. I'm the IT manager at HC at Home, and I'm an engineer at heart. One of my specialties is creating data connections in healthcare systems. I've got about 15 years of experience in this. For example, data connections with sensors that measure things from the body, heart, lungs, blood, skin. So data connections with sensors, but also with backend systems like hospital systems and laboratory systems. And in this short talk, I'd like to provide you with some inspiration on open platforms in healthcare, and by demonstrating the home hospitalization platform that we've created, and also going into a little bit how a new vendor or system would integrate with this platform. So first, a little introduction. In home hospitalization, we're trying to keep the patient out of the hospital building while at the same time maintaining the quality of care. And within the NWE-Chance project, we are working with a particular group of patients, the heart failure patients, who are either stabilized and released home early or not admitted to the hospital at all, so directly at home and then visited daily by nurses. So this creates a distance between the patient and the caregivers, and the home hospitalization platform fills the gap by remotely connecting them. One of the main purposes, One of the main purposes of the NWE-Chance project is to demonstrate that it's possible to combine systems from all these different vendors into a single platform that adds value in home hospitalization. And rather than being like a bunch of loose components, it should appear as a single system and be easy to use for patients and care providers. And on top of that, it should be easy to add new vendors and new technologies, so we don't end up with this rigid single-use design. So this is the platform we've created, starting from the feeling of a single system. So in order to promote this feeling, we have a single smartphone app and a single caregiver portal that can be accessed from the hospital. And then from this base, we have a bunch of sensors that help the patient measure and transmit objective data about their health to the caregiver dashboard so that their health status can be monitored remotely. So, for example, we have a weight scale, a blood pressure monitor, and an oxygen saturation, and the app helps to wirelessly transfer data from these sensors to the care provider portal. And in the NWE-Chance project, most of the patients were able to do this by themselves every day. In addition to that, the patient also wears a chest patch that continuously monitor the heart and the respiration rate and activity and posture. And the patch works autonomously during the hospitalization and only occasionally requires replacing some of the stickers on the chest. Patch data isn't monitored 24/7. It's not that kind of system, but it helps the caregivers to check up on the trends during their, let's say, virtual rounds with the patient. And finally, the app enables the patient to interact with an e-coach. And in this project, it's sort of a responsive questionnaire for measuring subjective parameters. So the sensors measure objective parameters. And with this, you can see, for example, how the patient is feeling. And eventually, all the data ends up in the caregiver portal, where it can be inspected by an integrated dashboard view. So in this overview, we can see each of the systems, they all have different vendors. So the weight scale, blood pressure monitor, and oxygen saturation sensor are just off-the-shelf devices from various vendors. And the chest patch and the eCoach and app and portal were built by the NWE-Chance partners based on their existing standalone services. So in summary, a platform with systems from 6 different vendors functioning as a whole, successfully integrated and tested in the home hospitalization pilot with heart failure patients. So on the openness of this platform, when you're building a platform, it's always important to think about this. People always ask, like, how easy is it to add a new sensor or change out this specific part? And it's very tempting to look at these questions from a purely technical perspective. For example, are you using open standards? Is it open source? In my experience, however, technology is almost never an issue when it comes to system integration. It sounds strange, but mostly it's the willingness to cooperate on an organizational level that really influences the efforts. For example, even an open source platform that is based solely around open standards, it still will have to be managed by some organization, and you need a secure way to connect to it. So if your access is denied, then you still have a closed platform. And if you turn it around, even an a closed source platform with proprietary but well-documented interfaces, if you agree to cooperate and you share documentation and your engineers can work together, then this could be quite a pleasant integration experience. So I would argue that the most important thing for platform openness is that this openness and willingness to cooperate is supported at the management level. So as long as engineers are aware of this kind of vision and following their own industry best practices, such as dividing systems into modules so that they're easy to manage, then technology, in my opinion, should not be a major roadblock, whether proprietary or not. To illustrate this point, let's look at an example of adding a hypothetical new vendor to the home hospitalization platform. Suppose this vendor has a device that can measure kidney function from a drop of blood. Let's also assume the vendor already has their own service with transmission and visualization of the values. So the parties agree to cooperate, since kidney function is a very valuable parameter to monitor in patients with acute heart failure, especially in combination with the other parameters that the home hospitalization platform already monitors. So without getting overly technical, I'd like to show you 2 integration strategies that we used in the project and which I think should work for most of the components that you could think of integrating into such a platform. So the first strategy is what I call tight integration. In this strategy, a sensor is connected directly to the smartphone app. For example, the sensor may support Bluetooth connections, and it would just take a small modification in the app to speak to the sensor and wirelessly retrieve the blood measurement values. Another example would be if the display of the sensor would support barcode or QR codes, and then you could take a picture of this with the smartphone and then in this way transfer the value wirelessly. And on the portal dashboard side, integration would be a little bit more work because you need to build, let's say, kidney function graphs. But as long as you don't have any special processing, then you're just drawing graphs. The process of building this should be relatively straightforward. In this strategy, you have the advantage that users have immediate control and feedback. There are no hidden components. You perform the measurement or you scan it and then transfer the result. And if something goes wrong, the app can tell you and you can try right away. And if it goes right, the app can also tell you right away that, okay, you did well. So this mostly works for devices who already have this kind of connectivity built in, since it tends to be costly to add later on because you need hardware changes. It's also most suitable for the kind of output data that doesn't need a lot of processing before having to be displayed. So what if this changes? Another strategy is loose integration. This can be used if the sensor does not have this kind of connectivity options, or it just doesn't want to transmit the data directly to the phone. So for example, let's say the vendor of this kidney measurement device has already built the sensor to only communicate with their own backend. So, and also let's also suppose that the vendor needs to process the measurements from the machine to actually derive, let's say, the kidney function. How can we integrate this? It's highly likely that the sensor will have some kind of serial number printed on it in some machine-readable way, like a barcode or a QR code. And even if it doesn't, I mean, it's pretty trivial to add a sticker to your device. You don't need any hardware changes. So what we can do is to link the identity of the patient to this specific measurement device by scanning the barcode or the QR code that is the serial number. And to be extra sure, we should verify this scanned code with the vendor of the kidney measurement device, because they will know if the device is one of their devices, or if you're maybe scanning peanut butter or something. So once this is linked, then we know where the data has to go. The vendor service, as it was, can remain mostly the same, and they only have to implement a small interface for transferring data and also responding to the barcode queries. And let's see. Stopped working. Okay, it's just barely visible. So from the point of view of the home hospitalization platform, it already has a barcode scanner, so you would just need to be able to talk on the back end to the vendor portal to ask for confirmation of the code and to receive the values. So in our example, we also said that there is some special processing that needs to happen. Now, suppose the vendor has a very specific way of drawing their graphs. Maybe they certified it. It's also possible to just have the vendor of the new system send the image of the graphs, and then the integrated dashboard could just display these pre-rendered graphs. That's a very easy way of integrating. And if you want to go a step further, you can even embed with a certain technique the pages from the actual existing vendor portal within the home hospitalization platform. So this is even less work to integrate. So if you adopt this strategy, it does mean a lot more components. Things can break underwater, so you have to make sure that you get enough feedback that if something goes wrong somewhere, you can take some actions, either from the patient or from, let's say, the technology supporter. But the bottom line is that this strategy is highly flexible and can be used regardless of whether the sensor has a way to connect to the smartphone. And it also avoids the need for, let's say, vendors to expose sensitive algorithms to the home hospitalization platform. So in summary, in these presentations, we've had a short look at the home hospitalization platform as it was built in the NWE-Chance project, using proprietary systems from 6 different vendors. The platform was tested to be easy to use, and it was also relevant for home hospitalization of patients with heart failure. And I've also shown you 2 integration strategies that we've used in the project: tight and loose integration, and shown how they could be used to easily integrate a new vendor. My hope is that this will inspire you that flexible home hospitalization platforms are technologically very doable with pretty much any combination of systems, open source, closed source, open or proprietary standards. It doesn't matter that much, as what really matters is the corporate willingness and vision to come together and combine the strengths of individual systems so that we can create vastly more powerful and relevant systems in the support of digital healthcare.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kai van Mierden, and I'm standing here on behalf of the company I work for, Sananet. The company is based in the Netherlands. It's an e-health company. And we participated in Passion HF next to Chance with one of our products. So a short agenda of the next few minutes. A brief introduction of the company Sananet and the products we offer. One product in particular is tailored to heart failure patients, and this product is also being used in Passion HF together with several other companies, universities, and medical hospitals. We developed DoctorME. And I'll give a short introduction or a short demonstration of DoctorME in this presentation as well. But first, Sananet Care. At Sananet, we believe that giving a patient knowledge about the why and the how of a certain disease, we can increase the interest and the trust a patient has in treatment and coping with the disease. If you manage to do this, you can change the behavior of a patient in coping with the disease. You can increase self-management of the patient, learn patient about certain symptoms, which in the end can prevent certain symptoms from happening, or if they happen, the patient knows exactly what to do. And this will, in the end, increase quality of life. Well, this vision we translate into products that we can offer to patients. How do these products look like? It's an app or a website offered to a patient, and we call them e-coaches. It's a assistant, virtual assistant of the nurse or a cardiologist in case of heart failure that coaches a patient in having or coping with a certain disease. An e-coach consists mainly of 3 components. First one is a personalized care plan. And in this, patient, together with his healthcare professional, sets goals for the treatment. And here also the status of the illness can be monitored. Second component is communication between healthcare professional and patient. So patient healthcare professional can send messages regarding the disease to each other. And a third component are sessions, which the e-coach offers to a patient. A few examples here on the slide. For example, a recurrent health check can be set every month, every 3 months, every half year to a patient, in which questions are being asked about quality of life, about symptoms, about coping with the disease in relation to family or work, you name it. Another important component are education modules. So every e-coach has specific education modules for a patient. For example, quit smoking, a very general one, but also how to ask for support within your family or at work, or what the disease actually is and what symptoms are with having this disease. Of course, patients still go to hospital, but less frequently. When a patient goes to hospital, and by going to hospital I mean outpatient visits, the coach, together with the patient, prepares for this session. And of course, a monitoring module, very important. If the system notices that the disease is worsening, a monitoring module is started in which the patient is being asked questions on a weekly basis or even on a daily basis. System calculates using algorithms, and if a patient is at risk, red flags or alarms will be triggered in hospital. A healthcare professional has a login to a dashboard as well. So every day the healthcare professional logs in, he sees a list of patients. We call that the intervention list of patients who are at risk. You can click on the patient and see the reason for generating that red flag, and the patient or a healthcare professional can take action accordingly. So, very brief introduction of an e-coach. We've developed in the last years several different e-coaches, several different programs with partners in the field. So with hospitals, the heart failure coach, for example, being developed together with Maastricht. And this is also the coach that is being used in Passion HF and in Chance, at least parts of it. This will bring me to Passion HF, in which, together with other partners, and you see them on the lower part of the screen, developed DoctorME. So the e-coaching part of the heart failure coach is being used, but we added the knowledge and expertise of different other companies and universities, hospitals as well. So, for example, we gather patient data by asking questions to a patient using an avatar, and this avatar comes in place of a nurse. So instead of going to an outpatient visit, the avatar asks questions to a patient that are needed, and that are the same questions that are being asked by a real doctor or nurse. Also, patient data and systems. So, for example, a patient information system is being collected in this, and the components that we added is that we translated the guidelines, international guidelines, into actual codes, so that we can make decisions based on the guidelines, based on the patient data. Another component from another company in this consortium is adding an artificial intelligence component. And together, these guidelines that has been translated to code and the artificial intelligence component come up with an advice of what to do next in the treatment of a patient. And this makes the treatment of a patient much more personal. In the end, this advice is also given to the patient by DoctorME itself. The concept, we are studying this now in a larger study with several hospitals, and I want to give you a short demonstration of the product itself. So the avatar already has asked some questions to the patient, so data is being gathered. There's also data available in external systems, and now DoctorME turns to me as a cardiologist saying there is a result available for a specific patient. In this case, it's patient Spitz. So click next to see what this result might be. In one overview now, DoctorME gives me a summary of the relevant data. So, for example, history, symptoms, measurements, lab values, and current medication. The most interesting part is that DoctorME gives me a conclusion based on all the information and data. And this conclusion is, in this case, patient is stable, no alarming sessions. Okay, I'll go next. And we built in an extra check phase in the study, so that me as a cardiologist can do a double check on the values. So, for example, I again dive into the measurements, last measurements and the measurements of the last 2 months, and see, for example, blood pressure, pulse, and weight for myself. Same I can do for lab values, and this is an extra check for me in the study. Okay, I want to hear the advice of DoctorME based on all the data. And DoctorME now, for example, says that new medication can be started. Again, an extra check for the cardiologist. Do I agree with this new medication or not? This advice is the same advice as would come out of the international guidelines. So in this case, as a cardiologist, I want to agree with this. And I know in this case, the avatar turns to the patient, and patient will get the same message. We want to make the patient, of course, make part of the treatment him or herself, and we ask the same question to the patient as well. So if the patient agrees with this change in medication, DoctorME sends a prescription to the pharmacy. The patient can get a new medication. In this demo, this then will be the last step. So no further results available to assess. DoctorME has done a job, and as a cardiologist, I did a double check. Of course, our dream is to go to a autonomous DoctorME. And that means that these extra checks by cardiologists aren't needed anymore. End of the short demonstration. I hope it gave you a view of what we did. And this is also the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
So Kai, can you expand a bit more about your AI module and how often and what is the magnitude of deviation, say, from current guidelines? What additional data is this AI module taking in that might, or how is it trained such that it's going to take you away from just the standard guidelines?
Take your time to answer, because that's a question which will enable you to develop quite a lot of topics.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Simple answer is I can relate to Explorers, the company behind the artificial intelligence module. Of course, for a part it's company secret, but maybe I can explain the difference between what we did by translating these guidelines and using artificial intelligence. So you have human intelligence, of course, and you have artificial intelligence, so intelligence of a machine. Human intelligence we used by translating these guidelines, international guidelines, into code. Meaning that, for example, we are looking at, say, 10 variables at a time. These variables can be combined, and you know there can be a lot of combinations on which an advice comes out. But then it stops for human intelligence, because adding more values is very difficult to calculate, and then we need computers. So instead of looking to the 10 values that are being used in these guidelines, we take all data into account. And it can be all data that are being stored in systems, or that the coach asks, but it's not really relevant for the guidelines, for example. And then artificial intelligence, so calculating this data, leads to certain patterns that are recognized. So instead of giving 10 patients the same advice, it can be that one patient needs a different advice based on some measures that have not been taken account in the guidelines that were made using human technology. The exact data or values that are being used in this module, I don't know. But that's quite the concept of using artificial intelligence and the guidelines both. So if the outcomes or the advice are the same, DoctorME will give that advice. If they are different, then DoctorME gives two advices. An advice based on the guidelines and an advice based on artificial intelligence. And the cardiologist can choose which one to choose or take his own advice. And that's what we are researching now in the study. Okay.
Okay, along that line, how have you trained your artificial intelligence system? You need for training it, you need a lot of data coming not from the patient itself, but from all patients. Mm-hmm. So can you give us some details without entering into the secret of the company, but can you give some details on how you have been training because that's a big challenge for everyone in developing AI.
Yeah, simple answer. We've using the heart failure coach for a very long time now. It was one of our first coaches, so we gathered a lot of data. All that data is, of course, being used to see patterns over the years.
Hi, this question's for Daniel. I suppose you presented very well the kind of openness of the platform and the ability for it to connect. Do you see the future as being different suppliers coming and using your platform and connecting different devices?
Thank you, Janet. Definitely, I think the survival of these platforms is dependent on having different technologies. If you look at, let's say, more monolithic single vendor systems, they often bog down in what they have, and then it's very hard to add innovation. Maybe they grow very well, but they also then stop becoming so innovative, I think. And if some startup somewhere has a sensor that is extremely relevant for a certain patient group, platforms that are naturally built to have cooperations between systems, I think will be much faster to adopt such devices.
That's a sales pitch. A collaborative platform. Really something to consider. Peter.
Question to Daniel. Do you also see possibilities with the platform that you have now developed also in the outpatient setting? Because obviously, well, this is all relevant data for treating patients, well, in some way inpatient. But obviously, on one hand, we need also to have the step of patients from inpatient to outpatient. But we also see often some variation and also deterioration in the outpatient setting. So what's your view on that?
So I think in general in healthcare, often, so HC at Home is a party that is quite close to hospitals, and you see that hospitals have their own systems, they have their own procedures, whereas patients, they go through, you know, from the GP all the way to the hospital, they move back and forth. And I think it will be, the question is, do you build a system that is very suitable for the hospital environment, and then what happens if the patient goes out? Then you lose track of the patient in your system. And can you somehow then go to a different system where you monitor using a different product, for example? So in the Netherlands, we have these personal health, the development of personal health systems. It's very early in this process, I think. But I see in the very least that the systems will need to provide a smooth transition between first line and, let's say, outpatient, inpatient settings. So the home setting, completely separate from any, let's say, healthcare practitioner, is a little bit of a different thing. It's you know, everyday life, but as the closer patients gets to the hospital and to the, let's say, care pathways, I think the more important it will be to have really professional systems, because you can have your let's say running app or etc. to work on your, and there's companies that have a lot of marketing and a lot of expertise in how to motivate people, and I think it's a big market. But once you get into the expensive healthcare systems, I think we need systems that are developed with professionals and that allow back and forth movement.
Yeah, that's I certainly agree with that, and I think you made a few good points. But very specifically now to your own platform, do you see a role in that, or how do you see that?
Yeah, I think so. The home hospitalization platform, although we call it home hospitalization, of course there's a lot of overlap with telemonitoring in general, and telemonitoring has been going on for quite a while already. So for this platform, it basically doesn't matter if what kind of sensors you add. You start from the use case. So because it's easy to integrate at a lower level also devices for different, let's say, more outpatient setting, like you can make the system suitable for that without, I think the main things to worry about are what are these processes that are going to need to change in order to have, let's say, the technology match it. That answers your question.
So the answer is yes.
Then the short, very short answer is yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Question for Daniel. What is your goal with the data that's being generated by the platform, all the data that you are collecting? What is your goal for the future on that? Because I see a potential of generating a lot of data for patients, and what are you going to do with this historical data?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It's a good question. At the very beginning, I think it's good to kind of realize this is patient data, so it belongs to them. And I think, I mean, of course, you can anonymize it and try to do things with it. But I don't see this as the main goal of, at least our main goal. it would be the goal of maybe a partner that you could connect to the system who would receive anonymized data. I think for us, the main goal of the data would be to involve the patient. We often see that providing feedback. I think when we started, it was like, let's not show the patient their graphs because they might get worried. And I think patients were very interested in seeing their graphs, and it motivated them. So helping the patient to acquire this data, understand it, and also take it with them to perhaps another system, I think are really the main goals, besides, let's say, providing the care professional with enough insight.
Thank you.